Skies lighten, scudding clouds scatter, skeletal trees show their first buds, skimming, skidding, fleeing leaves, skipping through the passing of the old and the cold into the birth of the new, the warming season of life. We humans forget Him, forget God. The earth does not. Life will not be denied, because God will not be denied. His power and His glory explode from every particle of everything that is, living or not. Life everywhere and always is hard, but it is life. Life surrounded by a universe that intends to be seen, to be measured, to be defined, admired, painted, gazed at in awe and amazement. Do you not see that? Do you not see Him? Stop looking away, so that our gaze might return to Him who created it all. Regardless of the pain and the misery of the here and now, there is always eternity. And if God gives you eternity, what other gift could you possibly want? And the only way to have any idea at all of eternity is to have lived, and for that, and that alone, we need to give thanks. Look, see, look deeply, see deeply, seek God. You will find Him. He's not hiding. He's everywhere. His face is in your face. His face is in your daughter's face, in your son's face. Seek Him in all things. In this way will you see the beauty in the ugly, the good in the bad, the noble in the atrocious, the blessed in the profane, the towering in the lowest, the exalted in the humblest. When you are at your lowest, you will find joy, not hope, but hope made real in your moments of despair, real happiness, a view of the eternity of which you are a crucial part. Seek Him in all things. You will find Him. He's not hiding. It requires only that you open your eyes and your mind. Where did it all come from? Why is the structure of the smallest thing precisely duplicated in the most massive thing? Why are there rules? Rules far above the ones you and I might formulate. Why is there anything? He created it all. He made it all mysterious. Mysterious, but begging for discovery. Mysterious, but expectant. Mysterious, but welcoming, beckoning, summoning, to be seen and marveled at. And we should, for God, see Him in everything, and marvel, and be glad, and fall to your knees, to worship and to give thanks. Let's face it, this trans stuff is strange at best, deeply damaging and dangerous at worst. There are other words for it that are far less charitable, but you can't say that, even though everyone knows it. It's a bit like not being able to say the sky is blue. There's not a single person on Earth who thinks that someone born a man can be a woman merely by thinking it, or vice versa. And let's not forget, there are actually people looking you in the eye and seriously proposing to allow the sterilization of young persons, preteens even, based on that young person's whim. We have qualms about allowing preteens to drink coffee. No one thinks to ask the man who says he's a woman how he could possibly know. When was the last time you heard about just how well and how completely men understand women? I know. Funny, right? Want to make a woman laugh? Tell her that men understand all about women. Want to make a man laugh? Tell him, well, you know. So how could a man possibly have even the slightest clue as to what, quote, being a woman, end quote, feels like? How did millennia of understanding that the sexes just don't understand each other, and that that's actually a good thing, just disappear overnight? Men and women, obviously biologically very similar, but also biologically, physiologically, psychologically very, very different. And that has always been a really good thing. You know, two different perspectives, so that the kids learn that there is not only one way to perceive things and all that, but it's barely possible to state those obvious truths. As it pertains to this trans nonsense, all this woke nonsense, all we had to do was say no. We didn't need to be mean about it. We didn't need to be cruel. We didn't need to do any name calling. We didn't need to do anything like that. We simply had to say no. You're going to have to give us more than just you are saying it and therefore it's true. You'll have to give us more than that to go on. Once you do, once you present us with something persuasive, present us with logic, present us with science, present society with something substantive, something meaningful, something with some teeth in it, and something that makes sense, something convincing, and society would go along with it just fine. I don't mind admitting it when I'm wrong. You woke people need to exhibit the same characteristic. If I'm wrong, show me how that can be true. I'm going based on millennia of common understanding of all the people who ever existed on the face of the earth, and you're talking about 105 billion who've ever existed. So I've got some backup, but do you? Do you have something more than just you say it? If you can't or won't do that, then you have to understand that the rest of America, even your supporters, and the rest of the world pretty much understands that what you're saying is a bunch of hogwash. At this point, the world perceives woke as a very tiny hair on a very tiny tail wagging a very big, fat, feeble, old dog that is the political left. Always remember, the political left lies. Remember the left's slogan of several decades ago? It was, power to the people. Well, what is power? More precisely, what is power when people have it? Easy. It's land and or wealth. Do you remember what the political left proposed to do if they were to obtain power? It was to take wealth and land from the people and transfer it to the government, which, presumably, they would control. In other words, the slogan, power to the people, actually meant power from the people, power to the leftists. Fast forward to today. What's the catchphrase of the World Economic Forum? The World Economic Forum is, by the way, essentially the successor to the long discredited Comintern, or Communist International. This was the group of thugs and goons whose mission it was to make communism seem respectable and palatable around the world, and so to spread it everywhere. So back to the very left-wing World Economic Forum. What is their shiny new catchphrase? The one they trotted out in the middle of the manufactured COVID hysteria? It's, you will own nothing and you will be happy. We can translate that easily. You means the people. Will own nothing means we'll have no wealth or land, which really means we'll have no power. Then they say you will be happy. So you will own nothing and you will be happy really means the people will have no power and the people will be happy. I'm trying to think, when was the last time the people owned nothing while the elites in power owned everything and the people were happy? Well, when the people have no power and the government controls everything, that pretty much describes every absolute monarchy and every absolute dictatorship that's ever existed. It also describes, well, serfdom. It's a good way to describe slavery. Tell me, under which of those systems were the people happy? The left lies, and lies, and lies, and lies. When they said power to the people, they really meant power from the people. And to us, the left, when they say you will own nothing and you will be happy, they really mean you, the people, will have no power, and we who will have all the power, we, the left, will be happy. I no longer watch Major League sports, and I don't miss it. It used to be about, sports, competition, trying to be the champion of the world, or at least of the United States and all that. Now, though, it's all about gambling. Every other commercial is about this online gambling service or that one. Now the announcers in the booths are telling you the odds for or against a team winning, given the current circumstances. I don't care what those odds are, and I don't understand why anyone else would. Oh yeah, to do some betting. Good grief. Next, I see this everywhere. Athletes pretending they just about saved the world if they score a touchdown or hit a double and knock 2 runs in, or hit a winner down the line in Wimbledon. Stupid little dances, vein-popping primal screams, and runic-seeming gesticulations and signs after whatever basically inconsequential little thing they've just done. First, it's just as silly and undignified as it can possibly be. Next, it's obviously the poorest of sportsmanship. It's rubbing the setback in the face of the opposition, which I was brought up to regard with disgust, as I do. and it's everywhere. Watch college baseball sometime. These athletes seem like primitive idiots every time they do something well on the sports field. Next, in order to participate in Major League sports, the boy or girl, then the man or woman, must devote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to training and nutrition and practice and working out at the gym. They no longer have any time to learn to be real people. Ask Tiger Woods how well that worked out for him. Yeah, he did really well on the PGA Tour, at the expense of his quality as a person. Everyone knows him as a great golfer and as an absolute jerk whom no one respects or admires. It used to be that even major stars in their respective sports had to work second jobs in their real lives during the off-season. But there's no longer anything like an off-season, and the athletes live, eat, breathe, and finally die with every moment of their lives having been entirely devoted to their sport. That's awful. As a society consuming the work product of these people, we seem to have forgotten that these are people too, that they have, or will have, families, children, nieces, nephews, brothers and sisters, lives that should have huge components that are entirely unrelated to their sport. There is no such thing as a throwaway person, but as a society, we've demanded that these people throw their own lives away in order to entertain us. We need to stop that. There are lots of ways to do that, but first, we must recognize that we are doing it. Sports aren't that important. Gambling isn't important, or it ought not to be important in our lives. Life is important. People are important. Major sports nowadays are lousy to watch because of the gambling and because of the chiseled, incredibly muscular athletes who are little more than precision machines, like robots, boring at best, disheartening and cringeworthy to watch at worst. If you're a thinking person, if you have a conscience, if you're paying attention to current events, if you've studied economics or history at a level at which you can speak in a relatively informed manner about the major events and currents of the last 2 centuries, if you're a good and decent person, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew or a Muslim, if you respect women, if you believe that kids should be allowed to be kids, if you're not a racist, if you're kind of a live and let live type of person, if you want all people's lives to get better, no exceptions, if you're responsible, diligent, hardworking, if you're a good dad or mom, if you like freedom of expression, of religion, of assembly, of association, if you said yes to any of these, then you have no good reason to vote for a Democrat candidate for elective office again for the foreseeable future. We know how the political left and right like to portray themselves. Leftists tell you how they're all for the people, for the little guy. They say they're against exploitation of the people by big business or by the rich. The right tells you they're all about freedom and individual responsibility, about establishing a climate where you worry a lot less about government involvement in your life. Also, the left is quite open and aggressive about accusing the right of all manner of terrible, evil things. They'll tell you that right-wingers, conservatives really, are all racists and sexists and all the rest. The left tells you that conservatives want to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. They tell you that conservatives want to make non-white Americans poorer and women poorer, if, that is, they can even figure out what a woman is, but that's for another day. And of course the left will tell you conservatives want to make children poorer, and all so the rich can get richer. But what are the results of the arrival in power of the left or of the right? Well, it is quite a study in contrasts. When the left comes to power, they immediately establish all the conditions that bring about all the terrible things they accuse the right of wanting to do. And when the right comes to power, they implement the things the left claims to hold sacred. The left lies to you and me, and it's because they do what they do and they say what they say in order to obtain and then retain power. That's it. They're not actually interested in solving problems, because if they were to do that, then we the people wouldn't need them anymore. Leftists get into politics, for the power that results from doing the politics. That's what gets them excited. That's what gets them up in the morning. That's the challenge that they love to tackle. Their fun challenge is in tackling the task of getting enough people to vote for them or to support them so as to validate their ego and, they hope, eliminate their many insecurities. A committed leftist is an immature person. Conservatives, on the other hand, get into the fray as a means to solve problems. Being in power is merely a means to the end of potentially solving a problem. Their fun challenge is to try to get the sense of accomplishment that comes from identifying the problem, determining a way or ways to solve the problem, and then implementing the solution and solving the problem. These are, of course, generalities, but they're nonetheless generally true. Conservatives simply operate on a higher level than leftists, a higher intellectual, emotional, and maturity level. People know this. There's a well-known phrase, often attributed to Winston Churchill. It goes like this: if you're not a liberal at 25, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 35, you have no brain. I would add, if you're not a conservative at 35, you also have no heart. Actually, apparently, many people said this, pointing out the fact that what I said is pretty well known. The problem with this is that the intellectually and emotionally stunted left doesn't understand its own limitations. To the contrary, they're just sure that they're the smartest ones in the room, that they're the adults. There's another expression that fits the left like a glove. Quote, "It isn't so much that leftists are ignorant, it's just that they know so many things that aren't so," end quote. That also describes each of us as young children and teens, doesn't it? Remember when you were 12 years old and you knew everything? And how did it go for those people who tried to convince you that you didn't know everything? For many of us, including me, life taught us that we didn't know everything, and it bestowed on the discerning among us a very real humility. Leftists don't learn this crucial lesson from life, and so continue to operate both intellectually and emotionally on the lowest level. The left is that 12-year-old who's convinced himself that he knows everything and will not tolerate the notion that he just might not. This is also why, as it pertains to the important issues of the day, if you're a conservative, you don't really expect an actual argument from the left and from Democrats. You expect rather to be shouted down, to be insulted, to be jeered at and slandered, to be censored, canceled, deplatformed, and shut down. The point being that, deep down anyway, leftists understand all too well that they don't really have any substantive arguments to offer, and rather than make that abundantly clear by having a real debate, they simply don't allow the debate to happen. Then they claim to have won the debate when the conservative point of view doesn't get broad circulation. This impression of the left having, quote, won the debate, end quote, is amplified by the leftist media, who simply assert over and over and over and over again that the left has won the debate. This is how it all has transpired, for example, with environmentalism. Environmentalism, you'll recall, is the issue with the, quote, scientific consensus, end quote. Scientists know, of course, that there's no such thing as a scientific consensus. After all, the consensus used to be that the sun orbited around the Earth. There are widely held beliefs by scientists, and you might call those beliefs a consensus, until they're not anymore, and the scientists don't believe them, because they've understood something new, something better, something that has come along to debunk the previous consensus. Do the names Benjamin Spock or Sigmund Freud ring any bells? How about Isaac Newton, who told us all about all the forces in the universe, until that was no longer true, as Albert Einstein told us? And much of Einstein's relativity theory is being debunked at this very moment. Scientific consensus is best described with one word: meaningless. Okay, 2 words: utterly meaningless. All right. Possibly a good jumping-off point for even better understandings of the world around us. Here's another rock-solid fact about science. Up till today, it was all wrong. Our understanding of things today is so much better than yesterday, and tomorrow, today's science will be wrong too, as we learn even more. But you can't ever tell those ever so pro-science leftists that. Did you hear the sarcasm in the phrase, pro-science leftists? Dealing with today's political left is like telling that 12-year-old that he doesn't know everything, and realizing that you're going to hear back only ignorant, immature, uninformed ranting and name-calling. You can't counter that hogwash because the leftist believes it to be great wisdom. What's the solution for conservatives? Well, one thing is for sure: we need to call it what it is. Ignorant, immature, uninformed ranting and name-calling in lieu of putting forth an argument. And we must remind them of this every time. Do college presentations solely focused on the phenomenon of the ignorant, immature leftists shouting down conservative speakers, and what to do about it. Chances are, ignorant, immature leftists will try to shout that speaker down, thereby proving his point pretty persuasively. Whatever we do, we must confront this idiocy head-on, and we must never allow it to attain the status of legitimate political discourse. Rather, we must expel such idiocy from the political discourse by calling it what it actually is and shaming the little babies who engage in it. That'd be a good start anyway. An important thing to consider when it comes to thinking about the political left and right is the historical record. Can we compare the respective records of the left and the right? Well, sure. Look around the world. Where mostly left-wing regimes have held sway, what is the record? Well, destruction. Power ripped violently from the hands of the people. Despair, impoverishment, death on an unimaginable scale. But as the left constantly flogs mostly equal societies, in those nations, the peoples are mostly equally impoverished, equally silent due to the abolition of free speech, equally paranoid, equally deeply oppressed and depressed, equally powerless. In other words, the left has delivered on what it always said it would deliver. That's around the world. How about right here in the mostly center-right Western world? Well, we do have left-wing enclaves, areas governed by leftist thinking, and sometimes for quite a long time. Here in America, we call those enclaves cities. Some of them have been very much under left-wing control quite literally for decades. How about the cities in America? How are they doing? Incredibly, in this, the most prosperous nation the world has ever seen, the cities are like reverse oases. Instead of small, lush, green, flourishing islands in a sea of desolation, American cities are small, geographically speaking, of course, stains of poverty, despair, petty crime, violence, governmental tyranny, and death on an inexcusably massive scale. But, as the left so frequently and so loudly proclaims, they're largely equal and equalizing areas of the nation. It should be noted that in these enclaves, by far, the most prosperous people are the very wealthy elites, industrialists, tycoons, moguls, billionaires, and zillionaires, who have said all the right leftist things, but have taken advantage of their access to higher-ups in the government to carve out exceptions and numerous other special arrangements that have enriched them mightily. Under the left, truly, the richest get far, far richer, while the poor either remain poor or become even poorer. It's the same story across the Western world. The cities of the Western world continue to deteriorate as leftist mayors and governments implement their very pretty-sounding leftist ideas to the destruction of so many businesses, industries, careers, and, most importantly, people's lives. This is the thing. Everywhere the left takes over, even when it's not hard leftists, as in the former Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Venezuela, Eastern Europe, Africa, and so on and so forth. In those places, first enslavement and deprivation of freedom follow, then come impoverishment and death on a massive scale. Where the left is most thoroughly in control, as in the places I just listed, despair and violent death are commonplace. In fact, they're far more common than happiness, or hope, or progress. The contrast with the record of the political right could not be more stark. In all areas of the world where the regime has been largely center-right or overtly right-wing, all the result has been increasing prosperity at all levels, meaning, yes, the rich have gotten richer, and the poor have gotten richer. Also, these nations have peoples who have seen longer, healthier lives, increasing freedom, less violence, less crime, vastly greater quality of life. And the main reason for all this is the central political philosophy of the political right wing, largely leaving you alone to live your own life as you see fit. A diminishment of leftism and of governmental power works out best for everyone, no exceptions, the rich and the poor. People understand innately that you and I prosper more when everyone prospers more. The richest among us understand it the best. Their desire is that they themselves get richer, of course, but they know full well that if the poor are getting poorer, that means that society is not doing well, and that their own wealth is in serious jeopardy. The richest among us know full well that if they want to get even richer, they must work for a society in which everyone prospers more. A society in which everyone gets richer, not just they themselves. So when the rich are working for their own selfish best interests, they're actually working to deprive the government of power and to put that power in the hands of the people. I wish I could say that I've just revealed some deep truth about economics, but this is really the most basic of stuff. Third-grade economics, really. But it's really basic third-grade truths that the left, especially the ones with advanced degrees, is completely unaware of. Fascinatingly, when this has not been true in the West, when there have been setbacks and decreases in prosperity and quality of life, it's always when, at least temporarily, Western peoples have lost their way and allowed leftists to take control, as in Scandinavia and large parts of Europe, for example. Scandinavia is where they are currently busily dismantling all the left-wing barnacles they allowed to encrust themselves on their body's politic, and they're turning their nations around. Finally, remember, if you place all power in the hands of the government, regardless of how wonderful and sweet and kind are the people currently in power, the day will come when scoundrels or tyrants will take over, and your country and you will be deeply, thoroughly screwed. The lesson is simple. Always, always, always keep the power to oppress out of the hands of the government. The left offers the peoples of the world a very simple bargain. Give us your freedom, and in return, we'll give you misery, poverty, squalor, violence, enslavement, despair, and death. Incredibly, people in the Western world keep taking them up on it. The insurrection myth. Not that it needed one, but the January 6th recordings that Tucker Carlson released on March 6th and 7th are just yet one more nail in the already heavily over-nailed coffin of the insurrection. We need to give January 6th, 2021 its real name, the insurrection myth. It's no wonder the Jan 6 committee didn't want the recordings released publicly. You and I and the public couldn't, you see, be trusted with the full story. We might have come to our own conclusions, like big boys and girls. No, the committee needed us to come to the committee's conclusion. I'm reminded of Stalin's show trials in the 1930s, where the government allowed only a very precisely constructed narrative to see the light of day, because the Soviet people, but especially the Soviet government's lackeys in the West, like Walter Duranty, needed to see not the truth, but the Soviet government's fabricated narrative. This is how the Democratic Party has treated us, the people, for decades now. Had we, the people, seen the footage that Carlson has just released, we'd still have come to the correct conclusion. 1. There was no insurrection. 2. There was a lot of perfectly denounceable, disorderly conduct, and we on the right properly and immediately denounced it. 3. There was, obviously, no need for a January 6th committee, which became only a kangaroo court anyway, as soon as the hack Nancy Pelosi disallowed any potential dissenting voices on the committee. This, by the way, might be the most egregious abuse of congressional power in any of our lifetimes. But you see, the Dems needed some immense albatross to hang around Donald Trump's neck, and a few eccentrics and kooks on January 6th obligingly gave it to the bastards. The problem was that if the entire story were known, then the hurriedly faked narrative would die before it was born, so the Dems needed to manage their fabrication very tightly. With the crucial assistance of Pelosi's power abuse and their minions in the media, they were able to do that and successfully launched the myth. In the final reckoning, January 6th was just a far, far, far less big deal than the hysterics would have you believe. It was the insurrection myth. There are a lot of lessons in this vast fraud committed against the former president and the American people. I can think of a dozen hugely important lessons right off the top of my head, but enumerating them would derail this very brief video essay from its now blindingly obvious thesis and conclusion. The correct name for January 6th, 2021 is the insurrection myth. I hope you're noticing the recent bank failures. These things are to be expected as our economy undergoes the inevitable turmoil associated with a particularly weak president and his incompetent and frankly stupid administration. That, though, is for another day. Today I'm focusing on a topic that spans presidents and administrations. The topic? The diversity, equity, and inclusion scam. If you look behind the scenes at the recent failure of Silicon Valley Bank, you'd see commercials and public announcements of which nearly none mention banking. You know, that thing that banks are supposed to do. We heard all about how the bank valued diversity, equity, and inclusion. We heard all about how the bank, by implication, is just overloaded with really good people And these really good people are all in the HR department, or are the manager of the bank's growing diversity, equity, and inclusion department, or they're the vice president of this or that, running this or that important community outreach project. But what is this? Is this some massive nonprofit organization doing its level best to change society and asking you to give up a few bucks to support their efforts? Or is this a frickin' bank? And you, to whom are you giving the thousands of your dollars in deposits? Are you giving your money to support some vast company's social justice work? Or are you intending to put your money in a bank? Because all these important community outreach projects cost money. And guess whose money they're using? Yep, yours. My take? If it's a bank, then they should do banking. Yes, they should allow their employees to act in the community and even do things like sponsor local Little League teams and Pee Wee football teams, Girl Scout troops and the like. And the goal of these sponsorships should be to put the bank's name in front of the community for the purpose of increasing the banking business. And that's it. Trillions and trillions of your dollars and mine have already been wasted on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look around you. How well has that worked for America? And it's a sure thing that diversity, equity, and inclusion helped torpedo Silicon Valley Bank, causing who knows how many people to lose billions of their own dollars. Banks and other businesses need to observe a very simple rule. If it doesn't contribute to your core business, then don't do it. Stay far away from it. Don't hire people who do it. Stay far away from it. Period. Everyone wants to help his or her community. Everyone wants to make everyone else's life better. Banks serve their community and improve it by being really good banks and by constantly improving and being ever better banks. That's how banks can improve the community. And that's the only way. And anything that doesn't obviously contribute to that mission is a waste of time, energy, and money, and contributes only to dragging your business down, which, ironically, harms the community. The vast complex of diversity, equity, and inclusion people in programs and initiatives and departments in companies and universities all across the land are all parasites. These things need to be abolished, and the people fired and encouraged to develop real skills that would allow them to find real jobs, jobs that don't harm America and Americans. When you evaluate where you want to spend or deposit your money nowadays, it can pay to find something out about the possible recipient of your funds, whether it be the corner grocer, or Amazon, or a bank, or somewhere else. Specifically, you might want to find out whether the company where you might spend or invest your money has a big diversity, equity, and inclusion component to their marketing, or to their web pages, or in their radio and television advertising and so forth. And if this company does do that, run far away from them. All that DEI twaddle is parasitical garbage that prevents any company from doing its core function. And all these people in marketing and DEI departments cost money, lots of money. And they have no actual business purpose, so they're a waste of money and a waste of time and energy as well. Your local business or bank serves its community best by adhering to good, solid business principles, and that's all it needs to do. Everyone wants to save the world, but no one can. Businesses should do business and leave saving the world either to other people, or they should do it on their own free time, not on the business's time and money. They should not waste your money and my money, money that they either build into higher prices to you and me, or lower compensation to their employees, or they filch it from some other unwitting person or group of people. But, the marketers will say to you, we use only profits for these social programs. Okay, the obvious question then is, why aren't you sharing that money with your employees, or reducing your prices, or investing in growth-related equipment and personnel for your core business? Want my business? Fire the DEI parasites. Make them figure out how to make an honest living. They've been ripping off you and your customers for far too long, and they need to go. Oh, and as a side note, if you were to do that with the universities as well, get rid of all the dumb SJW programs, curricula, departments, administrators, and other leeches, you'd reduce costs to students and their families by 50% or more. Let's briefly reconsider the recent banking failures. Like it or not, the Silicon Valley Bank failed due to bad management. due to mismanagement, due to stupid management, really stupid management. This was really stupid management being done by people trained to be managers of a bank. Bank managers trained to be bank managers who apparently could not manage a bank. You know what question this automatically poses. It's simple. How many other ticking time bombs are there like these incompetent and really stupid bank managers? The answer to that chilling question is simple. Everyone is pretty sure there are lots of them. No one disputes this. And looking at how the bank's management went about running their bank now, if the depositors and investors had known then that the bank was being run that way, they would have put their money elsewhere. They would have run far, far away. This is indisputable. Not a single depositor or investor wanted to lose his or her money. And even if the stupid Biden administration goes against the law again and somehow makes whole the ones who lost millions upon millions, sometimes billions of dollars, those investors and depositors did not want the aggravation of having to wait to get their money back or the stress of maybe not getting it back at all. So once again, the bank's prime directive, apparently, was to do what they considered to be good social work, not to do, banking. Here's the rub, though. The people who deposited their money there, along with the investors, hoped they were transacting business with a bank. If you call yourself a bank, and you advertise yourself as a bank, and you do some of the things that a bank does, meaning you take control of billions of other people's dollars, with which you then fail to do actual banking things, you're guilty not only of mismanagement, but also of fraud. Just as if I told you I could fix your car and I just ran away with it. So yeah, the diversity, equity, and inclusion goons are thieves too. As for the rest of us, we're being ripped off too. Whenever we pay higher prices anywhere, we're paying for this diversity, equity, and inclusion garbage. It adds no value to anything we buy. Oh, and by the way, it stokes racial tensions too. And if you're thinking, oh, it's fine, I'll pay a few bucks extra here and there, it's a lot worse than that. It's the primary reason you pay tens of thousands of dollars more than you should pay for your kids' higher education. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Administration parasites don't come cheap. They earn hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm sorry, wrong verb. They don't earn it. They steal it. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion racket is a multi-$100 billion racket every year. It's fraud and theft, pure and simple, and the depositors and investors of Silicon Valley Bank are just now finding it out. Many more will find it out very, very soon, I'm sad to say. This one's going to be a little bit off the cuff today. I've been noting with interest some conversations like the following. A young woman or a young man goes out into the street with a microphone, and he or she then sets about to interview passers-by. Other young men, other young women, older people, and the person asking the question has been asking the following two questions. What privileges do you have that I don't have? So typically that might be a young woman who's not white asking a question to a white man. And I remember seeing this very recently, in fact this morning. I think it was Savannah Fernandez asking a young white man. When I say young, he was college age, possibly a little bit older than college age. Very pleasant. It was a very pleasant exchange. And Savannah Fernandez, this young brown-skinned woman, asking this very much white young man, quote, "What privileges do you have as a white man that I don't have as a non-white young woman?" And the young man thought about it for a while, and he was stumped. And he admitted as much. He said, "You've stumped me there." Fernandez pressed the point a bit. She said, "Why did you go automatically to saying you have white privilege?" Because that's what had happened. In the beginning of the conversation, Savannah Fernandez had asked a question like, what's the difference between you and me, to the young white man, and he had said something about how he had white privilege. And she said, "Why did you go automatically to saying you had white privilege?" He then looked her in the eye and he said, "Well, he said effectively, you're a young non-white woman asking me about the differences in society between us two, And I sort of felt that I had to answer white privilege, because if I didn't, I could get in trouble. I could get canceled. Which was an extremely interesting thing. In other words, the implication is that under the surface, in all these interactions, where the woke crowds and the woke goons get so upset about some teeny tiny thing that someone has said or someone has done, really, underneath the surface, all the white people clamoring to say the right thing so they don't get canceled do not for a second believe the garbage they're saying. Another online influencer, if you will, who does this very effectively is a young woman named Pearl Davis, and she routinely goes out into the streets of London, where I believe she lives. I don't know if she does this anymore, because I don't know if she lives in London anymore, but she challenges passers-by, and she says again, she poses that very same question: what privileges do you have that I don't have? And typically she'll pose that to a man. So in other words, the question pertains to male privilege, this weird notion of male privilege, which of course is nonsense, because anyone who has ever been a man knows that there's no such thing as male privilege. But the point being that this stumps her interlocutor every single time. They cannot answer that question. They have no idea what privileges they, as men, have that she, as a young woman, does not have. And in fact, as it turns out, Pearl then goes through this absolutely deadly list of privileges that she has by virtue of the simple fact of her birth that the men do not have. She walks through family law. She walks through a divorce, of course. She walks through affirmative action. She talks about all the options available to women that are simply not available to men. For instance, women can opt out of the workforce if they want and just become traditional wives. Men really can't ever even think about opting out of the workforce, and so they don't. They work from the moment they can, at age 16 or so, till the moment they retire, if they're lucky, at age 60, 65, and hopefully they have a few good years left in retirement. The most important part of this, though, is the Savannah Fernandez portion of this particular post, in which it really seems obvious that a lot of people say all the things that they think are the right things that won't get them canceled, that won't get them fired, won't have any implications on their professional or personal lives, but they do not believe them for a moment, and they don't believe them one teeny tiny bit. That's very, very heartening. Now, if people could just be honest about that and simply say, this is a bunch of twaddle, it's a bunch of nonsense, hogwash, codswallop, we don't believe it for a moment. That literally might be all we need to do to save Western civilization, at least from the woke nonsense. Here are some more important points on the recent bank failures. In recent videos, I have spoken of the role of the diversity, equity, and inclusion scam in bringing about the recent bank failures, and that should not be minimized. But it wasn't the only thing that contributed to the debacle. However, in this video, I'm going to try to give you a layman's perspective on how to manage a bank properly, and how the managers or mismanagers of the failed banks completely blew it. Imagine, if you will, the American banking system as a vast ocean. Like any ocean, the system is affected by currents and tides and gravity and such. In that same vein, imagine the waves on the shore as the ebb and flow of business cycles. There are booms and there are busts, and times of calm seas and times of great turbulence and agitation. Now, what are the, quote, currents and tides and gravity, end quote, that affect this vast ocean that is the American banking system? Well, there are things like interest rates, inflation, employment levels, industry ups and downs, wars, the stock market, the bond market, commodities, laws and regulations and such. Anything that exercises gravity or weight on Americans' participation in the banking system and how they choose to do so affects this ocean. The really big influences are, of course, inflation, interest rates, the stock market, and things like that. The things you and I hear about every day when we listen to or watch the news. If any one of these factors were to shift suddenly, that shift is like an earthquake on the ocean floor. Only it's an earthquake on the floor of our metaphorical ocean that we're using to understand the American banking system a bit better. The follow-up to such an earthquake in the real ocean is almost always a tsunami that sometimes swamps large areas of land, leaving death and destruction in its wake. We saw that in Japan and Thailand recently, when devastating tsunamis followed deep-sea earthquakes, causing horrible death and destruction. Back to our analogy. Have we seen anything lately that might cause financial tsunamis in American banking? Sure have. Big things. COVID caused unemployment because idiots in government enacted stupid policies that literally prevented people from working. Businesses closed, leading to massive unemployment. The government then began to print money as if they'd never stop, foreshadowing the very inflation that we're seeing at this very moment. And what does the Federal Reserve do when inflation rises? Easy. It raises interest rates. What happens when interest rates rise? That drags the stock market down. Unemployment, inflation, interest rates, the stock market. Four of the big gravitational influences on the ocean that is the American banking system. What would the smart bank manager do in response to, say, COVID? The first in the really big triggers of important financial events in recent years. Well, he or she would easily foresee that the massive government money printing and spending spree would result in inflation. Obviously. That's clue number one. Next, interest rates have been at historical lows for years now. That's clue number two. Next, things never stay as they are. That's clue number three, and it's a law. But the smart bank manager must respond both to conditions as they are today and to the conditions they foresee, and he or she must try to make money from current conditions and both make money and prevent losses from future conditions. The point is that the smart bank manager would have foreseen higher interest rates and inflation more than 3 years ago, all the way back in late 2019 and very early 2020 when COVID was panicking the entire world. The smart bank manager would have asked himself, how do I make money from increasing interest rates, increasing inflation, and higher unemployment? And he also would have asked himself, how do I minimize losses in these conditions? The mismanagers of Silicon Valley Bank invested in long-term strategies that depended on interest rates remaining at historic lows for those strategies to pay off. But there was a reason everyone was saying that interest rates were at historic lows. It was because that kind of thing had never been seen before, and the obvious implication is that one shouldn't expect things to remain that way. Duh. Or, to torture our ocean metaphor just a bit more, the Silicon Valley bank managers saw the things that would cause the earthquake. They heard people talking about the incoming financial tsunami, and those managers bought shorefront property and went out for a nice swim at the beach. This was yet another way in which the whole DEI scam contributed to the bank failures. After all, if the vice president of this or that is more concerned with making sure that the trans people in the community are okay and the POC aren't upset and there aren't any objectionable statues on the town square, and if that same vice president is not paying attention to the things that affect, bank stuff, well, that bank is going to be swamped by the tsunami. And it was. As were more banks. How many more? I don't know. All the ones who took their eyes off the ball and forgot an eternal truth about banking. The bank that helps the community the most is one that does really good banking. It's also the one that continues to improve its banking. And it's the bank that understands that it needs to avoid anything that doesn't directly contribute to its doing banking stuff all the better. It's the bank that doesn't try to pretend that it's not a bank, or worse, that it's more than a bank. Well, it's time to get to know the good doctor a bit. I'm a man, none of this pronouns nonsense. I'm conservative, but I don't fit easily into that box. I think that if a staunch conservative and I were to discuss things, eventually we'd come to agreement on most things. Where I differ from nearly all conservatives is this. I believe we should try various aspects of leftism in local and temporary ways. Try socialist healthcare in a state, but sunset it at, say, 10 years. Then if the state still wants it, all they have to do is reenact it. Try this with lots of leftist ideas in states, and see how the people react to them. But again, sunset them. If the people want them, they'll demand them when they expire. Easy. More about who I am a little bit. I've written many books. I do lots of media appearances. I stay anonymous in order to avoid possible confrontations with leftists who have demonstrated that they can be violent. Physically, I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall and very muscular. I'm a lot more creaky now that I'm no longer an athlete. I used to be a professional athlete. I retired early, only to work harder and more than when I was working. Former professional baseball player, former male model, former IT professional, still dabble in web-type development, former professional many things, former professional musician. Didn't make a living at it, though. It was just for fun. I'm a guitarist. I play jazz guitar. It's really more kind of free jazz guitar. I do very improvisational stuff. I'm very well read. I've read a lot of books. Born in Connecticut, have lived in Massachusetts and France also. I love astronomies. I love animals, cats and dogs especially. I love the arts and music. I'm very, very, very heterosexual. I was married, widowed now. I have 2 young adult kids. I don't have enough words to tell you how wonderful my kids are. I'm a very lucky dad. I come to my conservatism very honestly, and for reasons that are both anecdotal and confirm what I've been observing anyway. I used to have a temper, and used to be massively competitive. Maturity cured both those characteristics, and now I love to compete against myself, but I'm quite content if someone beats me at something, even something at which I'm quite good, like ping pong. It's impossible to offend me. That might be a problem, as being a white man, it seems evident that white men need to take offense at all the brainless hostility directed at them. I still write a lot. I tend to do this online, in various forums and discussion boards. I love the out of doors and I love to learn. I love to learn about just about anything, but my current primary passion is current events and politics. I think that this is probably because of the serious situation in which our nation finds itself. You probably know that I have nothing but contempt for the current president. He's always been an idiot, and age and dementia have not improved him. Worse, he has the ego of a small man. So he's always surrounded himself with people who were even less intelligent than he is himself. I knew that Biden was an idiot more than 30 years ago. Worse, he's always surrounded himself with idiots, such that he truly always seems to believe he's the smartest man in the room, and he just might be because all the other ones cleared out. And all while he's just a babbling buffoon. And he's a creep. But worst of all, he's as incompetent as he is dense. Even if he did have the best interests of the nation in mind, he wouldn't be able to do anything but harm the nation anyway. The rest of the country has serious problems too, and I write and post videos about those things. Things like the ghastly response to COVID, the mental disease of wokery, the diversity, equity, and inclusion scam, race relations. Then there are the equally vital foreign policy issues: Ukraine, China, North Korea, Cuba, Africa, the Middle East, and more. The current president and his administration aren't competent to understand, much less deal with them, with all this. I put out videos talking about all these things and more, and that's just a little bit about me. I hope to learn a bit more about you, so please feel free to communicate with me. Go on to the YouTube channel, and there you'll see ways to contact me and send me information about yourself. Who knows, maybe we'll broadcast it if you're okay with it, and I'll be talking with you again very soon. Thanks. One more quick thing. At the end of the video, you'll note that our catchphrase is exposing the minefield. And that's because there's just an awful lot of stuff out there that is just garbage. It's not information, it's just noise. We pick through all the clutter and we pull out the nuggets and we make things clear. We use imagery, we use examples, we use evidence, we use logic, but we cut through all the useless clutter that's out there, and we give you clear reasons for why we believe as we believe. We simplify, and that's part of the problem with what's going on in America today. Everyone thinks it's really, really complex, but everything, all issues, every single issue out there boils down to something really, really simple. We clear out the complexity, the useless complexity, and we expose the simplicity, and we make it clear. We bring clarity from the muck that surrounds us all every single day out there. We hope that can help, and help to make things clearer for you, and help to give you different perspectives that will help you make things clearer in your own mind. In a bit of a nutshell, that sums up one of our missions here at Dr. Avenir. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back very soon with another video.